Welcome to the Spartan News. I'm Army Master Sergeant Thomas Wheeler, and I'm your host. In this episode, we change things up a little and speak with Task Force Spartan Public Affairs NCOs about the missions they've covered over the past few weeks. So let's get started. So we've had a pretty busy month over July, and today I have Sergeant Trevor Cullen, one of our PA NCOs, who's provided much of the coverage that we're about to go over. We'll also have Sergeant Andrew Valenza and Sergeant Andrew Winchell with us as well, but right now we'll start off with Sergeant Cullen. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, as we were talking about, we've covered quite a bit over the last month, and some of those things I wanted to talk with our PA NCOs about for this edition of the Spartan News. Tell me about, in particular, the KLEs you've been covering over the last 3 weeks.
Roger. So what we've been doing in the region is we've been working with our host nation partners. So Task Force Spartan has various sections all the way from aviation to engineering that will go out and interact with our host nation partners. Part of that interaction is called key leader engagements. So leaders from Task Force Spartan will go over and speak to leaders from the Kuwait Land Forces or the Kuwait Air Force. In 2 cases, we went to aviation key leader engagements where soldiers from Task Force Spartan's aviation section met with aviators from the Kuwait Air Force. This is a very unprecedented thing because usually the Air Force of Kuwait and the Air Force of the United States directly deal with each other. The Army usually doesn't cross over. But because since the Army does have aviation assets in Kuwait, they're going and now talking through and opening channels of communication in order to better help our partners and our friends in the region.
So what were some of the things that they were talking about? I mean, I know the main reason why the Army's involved with the Kuwaiti Air Force at this point is because helicopter-wise, our helicopters usually fall under the Army. The helicopters in the Kuwaiti military belong to the Kuwaiti Air Force. Is that correct?
Yes.
So what were some of the things they were discussing or some of the things they were trying to work on? So
with our aviation assets, we, particularly in Task Force Spartan, have the General Aviation Support Battalion, which provides lift assets and medevac assets. Part of that is some standard operating procedures that exist for our aircraft when they're providing aid to people. Sometimes involves taking them to host nation hospitals. Part of that is when you're moving a medevac through a city, we want to make sure that we're flying neighborly.
So you did one special one recently with engineers. Tell me a little bit about that.
So the engineer KLE that we conducted, we went over to the Kuwaiti Land Forces Engineer School. This is the school that trains everyone who's going to be an engineer from your junior NCOs all the way up to your field grade officers. All these engineers will follow 3 different routes. They have the plant, which is moving equipment. They have EOD, which is explosive ordnance disposal. And then they have combat roles, which would be similar to the U.S. Army's 12 Bravos, the combat engineers. So they'll go through and basically the conversations that were had from our Task Force Spartan Chief of Engineering is basically going through how can we assist in training and how can we do mutually beneficial training. So we talked a lot about subject matter expert exchanges, where we can take someone who is very well versed in a certain engineering thing, and that could teach the Kuwaitis, and also the Kuwaitis, since we're in their backyard, they're used to working in a very hot, sandy environment, and they might have some tools or tricks of the trade that they know for dealing with that heat. We can go through and learn things from both people to make both organizations stronger. So it was a very cool opportunity to go through and see that not only are we assisting our host nation partners, but we're also taking our soldiers in training.
But that wasn't the surprise. We talked about it after you got back. What was the surprise when you got there?
So one of the big surprises we had was I was not tracking that the Her Majesty's Armed Forces were actually there in an advisory capacity assisting the Kuwaiti engineers. So there were British warrant officers that are assigned to the Kuwait Engineering School and to the Kuwait Army that are assisting and basically giving additional guidance and really taking their experience, because a lot of the Kuwait engineering model is modeled after the British Army. So we were also fortunate enough that we got to speak with some of Her Majesty's soldiers, and we're able to go through and really kind of learn how they interact with the host nation as well, so we can take that and almost have a 3 country, because it's always better to have more partners than less.
And then recently you also got a chance to take part in a patching ceremony. Tell me a little bit about that.
So, like I previously said about the General Aviation Support Battalion, the GSAB folks fall under the 34th Infantry Division, which is the Red Bulls, and the Red Bulls have a element that's located in Saudi Arabia, and as a result of that, that's deemed a combat zone, so they are authorized a shoulder sleeve insignia for former wartime service. So the battalion commander and the battalion sergeant major went over and patched those soldiers. It was very cool to watch because it's literally history in the making. You have these soldiers who are receiving this, and it's a permanent award because for the rest of their career, they're authorized to wear that shoulder sleeve insignia. So it was definitely very cool and a very special moment to go ahead and see that these soldiers are receiving something that's going to definitely be cherished for the rest of their career.
And most recently, you covered an exercise here involving HIMARS. Talk to me about that.
So the HIMARS training that we went to was more or less via CENTCOM guidance. There is a flexible response force that has to be available. So we have HIMARS located all through the Central Command area of responsibility, and they literally just did training on how to take the rocket pods and quickly load them into the launchers and then move to the site where they could go ahead and utilize those field artillery capabilities. This was conducted by the 4th Battalion of the 103rd Field Artillery Regiment. Let me tell you, these soldiers were outstanding, working in extreme heat, and it was definitely extremely humid that day, and these soldiers performed excellently. It was really cool to see the amount of teamwork that they have, not only with specifically just their squad, but part of these load exercises, you have multiple trucks next to each other. So not only do they have to worry about their certain areas, but they also have to worry about their left and right limits. So you had crew chiefs that were coming around making sure that when they're turning launchers, they're not causing any safety violations or possibly harming any vehicles or any personnel. So it's definitely a very cool and a very fun thing to look at because who doesn't love seeing rockets?
I don't know how you saw anything considering that day. I mean, we were talking about the issues with the cameras and the lenses fogging up and whatnot. I mean, every time I walk outside, my glasses instantly fog.
Yes,
it's definitely a curse.
It's definitely difficult, especially with the cameras. You just got to stand out there for a couple minutes and wait to acclimatize. But fortunately enough, we got some workarounds and we were able to still get some good footage. Be able to make sure that those guys are getting credit for the work they're doing because, like I said, they're doing a strenuous job and they're also doing that job in extreme heat.
Well, thanks, Sergeant Cullen, for joining us. Until next time. So now we have Sergeant Andrew Winchell. He's another Public Affairs NCO with the Task Force Spartan Public Affairs Office, and he covers several things as well. Recently, he covered a couple of classes, as well as covering down on some of the things our logistics folks are doing. Welcome, Sergeant Winchell. So, like I said, you covered down on quite a few things. Let's start with the supply story. Can you give me a little bit, or give me your take on the coverage that you provided, and kind of like anything that you learned out of it, or important points from it, and things that others might want to know or be interested in knowing?
Well, pretty much with the supply story, I went over what it is, what our supply has to do to get us from home station to MOB station, and then from MOB station overseas, and then back home again. And being one of the active members of the Guard with them, I kind of knew what the process was leading up to MOB station. Then at MOB station, I obviously separated off and, went with my section for public affairs. But when we were back stateside, I don't think a lot of people realize how much falls on the full-timers, especially when you're preparing for mobilization. So I think writing the article, helped open the eyes to some people, because we have our M-Day force, which is your traditional weekend drillers, that one weekend a month. But we don't have those guys, because when we get them that one weekend a month, we can't really utilize them for things to get us ready because there's other training that they have to do as well. Nothing against our M-Day force, but that's what their duty is. It's to show up, do what they need to do for that drill weekend, and then be on their way. As we're the full-timers, we had the task of setting all the vehicles up, getting all our equipment ready, inventorying and making sure everything was prepped and ready to go overseas. And then once we got that, we also had to separate what was going to be going with us to MOB station. So we all assisted supply with that, and that gets talked about in the story. And then once we got to MOB station, we separated. So I was curious, what the rest of that looked like for them. So Sergeant Carlson basically broke it down and went through the fact that once we got to MOB station and having the full force of having the M-Day guys to assist as well as her supply assistant, Specialist Bennett, it made things so much easier being active duty per se compared to being back home and just having the full-time staff to complete tasks. Because now you have all hands on deck, you were able to, if need be, you could pull people from another section to assist you. And, going home is going to be that much easier because we still have everybody available and all hands on deck. And that's pretty much just a breakdown of what the story was.
We've talked about it on and off about, the time that you spent leading up to Christmas or, December. And a lot of that time was spent, at Fort Drum and whatnot, putting the equipment together, doing bumper numbers and things like that. And yeah, I think a lot of the traditional guardsmen don't get the chance to see that behind the scenes stuff. They come in, they do their required training, but they don't get to see what happens when they're at their civilian jobs, for you guys when you're doing that. So it definitely opened up the eyes of folks to see, kind of like the behind the scenes part of it. So you also most recently covered a couple of classes, one dealing with suicide awareness and then another one dealing with equal opportunity. First, tell us about the assist class.
The assist class, that hits home for a lot of people, especially in the military, because a lot of us have dealt with or know somebody who has dealt with, committing suicide, or they have a friend, or even, it kind of relates to outside too, because, we have a lot of people in the civilian sector that deal with this. So I think when trainings like this are offered, it's very important for the military. And it's nice to see engagement, especially from senior leadership. I noticed that there's a lot of captains and above at this course. So that just shows, they're looking to take care of their soldiers, and they're looking to educate the force. Because a lot of these guys, when they leave these courses, they don't leave the course, just educating themselves. They go out and they sit down with junior enlisted soldiers and stuff, and they go over things. And then that soldier carries it to the next soldier. And, that's kind of how these classes are designed to work as well. It's not just those who attend that learn, because the person is going to take those learnings and they're going to move on to the next guy and teach them without ever having to go to the course. It's just, those who go to the course, they get the hands-on training with the SMEs, the experts who know. But, you can learn just as much from a secondary source as you can from the primary source, as long as the teaching is good, which I thought this class was conducted very well. But yeah, to get back to the fact of, we deal with this on a daily basis in the military, because, we have that 22 a day. It's, a big number, and, anything we can do to cut down on that is obviously always a benefit. So I think it's good that we have this class. There's going to be future classes, and I think for anybody out there, it's a great class to go and take and be part of. Even if you haven't dealt with this, maybe you can help somebody else to deal with this.
So the class is aimed at not just leaders, but it's also all ranks?
All ranks, yes. It's for juniors, seniors, it doesn't matter. The class is for everybody, because everybody out there is a preventative measure. Everybody is, an ear to listen, because anybody, anywhere can prevent somebody from going over the edge. It might be something small in somebody's life that just needs somebody to listen to them. So, it might be their next door neighbor that they sit down with and have a conversation that saves that person's life. You just never know.
Who do people contact if they want to go to that course? I know that, like you said, there's several, or at least there are a couple more coming up in the near future.
I would get in contact with any chaplains, whether it be the 42nd chaplain here for Task Force Spartan, or it be a chaplain, through their chain of command, wherever it may be. Get in contact with the chaplains, because they are the ones setting up this course. And
the EOLC course, what did it involve?
So the EOLC is the Equal Opportunity Leadership course, and it was offered again by Task Force Spartan EOAs. Basically, they're the SMEs, and they, same thing as, the previous class, is they teach junior and seniors of all ranks, and they go through and they break it down to make people realize that we have underlying biases that we don't even notice. So they just kind of an eye-opener for people, and then they bring that knowledge and they bring it out to their soldiers and their commands and whatnot, and they break it down to the fact of, hey, you might be doing this, and it's being perceived this way, so just be careful. And it's more of an education thing, because, like I said, a lot of people don't realize that they even have these biases, because they've developed them growing up as a child all the way up through to where they are now in the service, and they don't think anything of it. It's just second nature. It's like muscle memory. You don't even realize you're doing certain things or you're acting a certain way. So this class helps people to see that these things are taking place without even knowing about it. because they do, Sergeant Ross is one of the ones who conducted this class, and she told me about an exercise they do. It's called the life raft exercise. Well, they're doing this, and they're basically giving 8 individuals, all different ethnic backgrounds, religions, and whatnot, and you were just given a very small piece of information about these people, and you had to decide on this life raft which 4 got to stay and which other ones had to go off. So you're basically deciding who gets to stay on the island. And with the little information were given, they went through and they broke it down, and they kept like a couple females because they had kids. They kept a couple other people because like one was a doctor and whatnot. But then they give you more information once you make that decision, and it's more of the eye-opening. That's the wow moment, as Sergeant Ross called it, where, oh geez, that doctor you see, he was there having an affair, and now you just saved this guy, but he wasn't really worth saving. As where you got rid of the woman who was confined to a wheelchair, but she was a rowing champion and could have helped you to get to safety. And it makes people realize that there's more to a person than just meets the eye, and you take the time to get to know somebody before you judge a book by its cover, kind of deal.
Yeah, it sounds like a good class to take. My understanding was it was a certification class for EOs, or for equal opportunity personnel. Was it a certification class?
Yes, it was a certification class it certified everybody who took it there. I believe they had 40 individuals because they had the 10 here in Kuwait, and then there was more in Camp Beering in Kuwait, and then there was also some more, I want to say KSA, I think Sergeant Ross said. But throughout that, they had all these people, so they had virtual as well, but all these people became certified EOLs, so they all became equal opportunity leaders. So they weren't at the level that Sergeant Ross is at, being an advocate, but being a leader, they're able to conduct these sort of classes as well at their level. They can't certify people, but they can hold a course, and teach people about this stuff now, because they are now SMEs themselves.
That's good information. So pretty much sounds like you learned quite a bit from everything that we've covered over the last week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So thank you for joining us again.
Pleasure to be here.
So now I have with me Sergeant Andrew Valenza, who's he's a PA NCO, or serving as one. He's really actually a combat camera guy. He's our expert when it comes to camera operations and equipment. But he's doubling as a cross-trained PAO. So he's covered quite a bit of things lately as well, especially key leader engagements, and then an interesting story about our resident space soldiers. So welcome, Sergeant Valenza.
Thank you for having me.
So like I said, let's start with the key leader engagements. You've done a couple of them. You did a couple with the field artillery folks, as well as a medical one. Tell me about the field artillery KLEs. What are some of the things that you found interesting? What's your take on it? Something maybe people might find interesting about the things you've covered?
I think probably the most interesting part of the field artillery KLE was the fact that I was able to be there firsthand for us working with foreign military. It's a experience I've never really had before. So I got to firsthand learn about that kind of culture and the way we interact with them. I spoke with a few people, got to know them personally, and it was something I never really expected to do. So I enjoyed that a lot.
I think it's important too for folks to understand in this region of the world too, is that relationships are very important. So building those relationships are key to successful operations in the future. So I think doing these KLEs definitely helps to earn that respect, that trust, build that relationship so that we can do great things in the future. When it comes to the medical one, this one was unique. You got to go down and do a tour of quarantine facilities that the Kuwaiti military runs. Tell me a little bit about that.
So for that, I joined the 3rd Medical Command, and we took a trip to downtown Kuwait where they had a quarantine facility set up in which the Kuwaiti Ministry of Defense was working with 3rd Med to provide healthcare for people affected by COVID-19. So it was interesting seeing how we were able to play a part in helping provide supplies and medicine and whatever was needed for Kuwait to deal with the coronavirus.
and correct me if I'm wrong, we provided mostly guidance on it, and most
yes, most of it was guidance, how to set up the facilities, what the best procedures were for social distancing, and that kind of stuff. And we would step in when needed. First, it helps them to be more prepared in the future, not just medical disasters, but also, natural disasters, stuff like that. So that could hit at any moment. The Kuwaiti government knows how to be more prepared for, and it's it can double back. We're here for them, and they'll be here for us when we need them.
I think the 3rd Med being a reserve unit, and then the 42nd, our parent organization being National Guard, we're definitely uniquely qualified to deal with natural disasters and things like this, and running shelters and providing that support to the local authorities. So I think this definitely is nested pretty tightly with what we do back home. And then lastly, tell me about our space soldiers.
So that was an interesting story I did, because soldiers of the Space Corps are a very unknown skill set. So I got to learn firsthand what this is like and be able to share that story to, shine a little light on them and learn about the qualifications needed to get into that job. It's a very labor-intensive field, takes a lot of training, and it was really interesting for me to learn about, and then be there for them to receive their space badges.
What's the qualification requirement for that badge?
So there's different levels of the space badge. These soldiers that I met, they were getting their basic space badge, which takes 2 years of training to be able to receive. So these soldiers put in a lot of hard work, and it definitely showed when I spoke with them.
There's a lot of interest in it, especially with Netflix series Space Force, the activation of the Space Force as another military branch. I mean, there's natural curiosity among folks within the military about this. I mean, I can't count how many times I've seen on social media, like, oh wow, they activated the Space Force. Can I transfer? All our PA folks are like, hey, when are they going to open up public affairs positions in Space Force? So
yeah, so that is interesting because there is that new interest in this stuff, and everybody's talking about the Space Force wanting to join it. People talk about people in the Army like, oh, I can't wait to go to Space Force, but nobody knows that we already have positions like that. So I'm kind of glad that I got to shine that light, because not only to give these people credit, but to show the opportunities that are available to these soldiers that are interested in these fields.
A lot of people don't realize that a good portion of that is in the National Guard. I mean, our guys are from the Colorado Army National Guard.
Yeah, it's one of those fields that deserves a little bit more recognition.
Well, great. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us. That wraps up this episode. To check out the stories we covered during the show, please check the Task Force Divots page at www.divotshub.net/unit/TF Spartan. And please be sure to check out past and future episodes by searching for the Spartan News on Apple iTunes podcasts.